The hypocrisy of video game rating sports just knows no bounds because they're lobbied by many of the big corporations who want loot boxes to remain surprise mechanics rather than what it is, gambling, something that should be regulated. The rating sports essentially pretend like loot boxes aren't gambling in any way, shape, or form. They say that they take gambling very seriously. Simulated gambling will increase the age rating of a game, but loot boxes, no effect whatsoever on the rating. FIFA, which essentially allows you to spend real money for the chance of obtaining very low probability, highly desired rewards like players, that's safe for kids, even though there are reports out there that kids have spent money en masse, because they're just kids. They don't know what they're doing. They want the thing. They want Lionel Messi. And before you know it, parents' bank accounts are empty. But somehow that is safer than, say, Pokemon, and the fact that there's one area that has imagery of casino and you can simulatedly gamble in that game in a way that's pretty much completely harmless. There's just a complete disconnect there, and this is willful ignorance. I mean, anyone with common sense will tell you loot boxes are straight up just gambling, but organizations like the ESRB, PEGI need to deny this so that game companies don't face even more legal scrutiny, don't admit to the fact that what they're doing is wrong by implementing loot boxes and not calling it gambling and not regulating it. PEGI's hypocrisy in particular can be further spotlighted by some recent developments and discoveries. There's a Twitter user going by the name Joe Merrick who noticed this article from a website Ask About Games in which it is reported that PEGI from here on out will deem any game with any form of simulated gambling where you actually play a casino-like game, regardless of whether there's real currency involved or not, will be deemed 18 plus. So that means that kids games that occasionally do feature casino-like mini games that don't involve any real money expenditure whatsoever will essentially be labeled as adults only games. Games like FIFA, on the other hand, which feature blatant gambling, which is just a casino disguised as a soccer game, those will be rated lower. Those will be deemed safe for kids. Those will continue to be PEGI 3. So this is Twitter user Joe Merrick who tweeted a link to the article and had this to say: so it seems that any video game that has simulated gambling is now rated as an 18 plus in Europe through PEGI. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow all flagged as gambling. As much as people hate the removal of the game corners in Pokemon games, it's clearly necessary. Do note that their current ratings remain at what they were, so these games are still 12 plus in Europe for it, but on re-release, unless these features are removed, all these Pokemon games would all require 18 plus ratings in Europe. And this initiative does seem to be somewhat recent given the inconsistency on the official PEGI website. On the front page, if you hover over the 18 plus label, you won't see anything about gambling. It says right there, the glamorization of the use of illegal drugs and explicit sexual activity should also fall into this age category. No mention of gambling, whereas if you go to the What Do Labels Mean page of this website, you'll find that the last sentence has been adjusted to add simulation of gambling, the glamorization of the use of illegal drugs and of the simulation of gambling and explicit sexual activity should also fall into this age category. More specifics can be found if you go to the Ask About Games website. Updated PEGI criteria for gambling ensures any new game that includes elements that encourage or teach gambling are now rated PEGI 18. A specific example provided is this game called Overboard, a murder mystery game where the twist is that you're the murderer trying to fool people into thinking you are innocent. And while a lot of the content descriptors here, mild violence, suggestive themes, and use of alcohol, would give it a PEGI 12 rating, because of this new criteria, and because this game does feature a scene where you can play blackjack with another character, now this game, which definitely looks to be more in the teenage range, is being deemed for adults only, not safe for anyone under the age of 18. It is further specified in the final paragraph that if the gambling is just part of the story and you don't directly partake and the game doesn't teach you gambling through a minigame or something, then that's fine. But if the game must actually teach the player how to gamble or bet and or glamorize gambling, then you get that 18 plus rating. And the gambling has to specifically be stuff carried out in casinos, gambling halls, or racetracks. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how they'll try to justify why loot boxes aren't labeled to be not just simulated gambling, but straight up just real world gambling. They'll say, well, opening loot boxes is not an activity you do in casinos. It's definitely not gambling because casinos don't have something similar. But since when does something have to specifically resemble games that you'd find in casinos and typical gambling halls in order for it to be deemed gambling? All loot boxes are is just a more video game-fied version of gambling. Gambling is gambling no matter what shape or form it takes, as long as it meets the criteria of players having to spend real money in the hopes of getting something of value in return, be it more money, or be it in-game items and boosters, or cosmetics, things that give players emotional value, whether that comes across through the visuals of casino-like games like roulette and slot machines, or through more video gamey imagery like card packs and the like. It shouldn't matter what the visuals are. What should matter is how the system is affecting players, specifically psychologically. And the fact remains that slot machines and loot boxes, they affect players similarly. They exploit the same psychological tics to get players hooked. But of course, to keep loot box monetization alive, they'll specify how for gambling to be gambling, it specifically has to resemble what you'd find in casinos, gambling halls, or racetracks. That way they can say, well, loot boxes look like nothing you'd find in these venues, so it's technically not gambling. This kind of willful hypocrisy is why we're seeing frickin' Pokemon Red and Blue have a higher age rating of PEGI 12, whereas FIFA gets to be PEGI 3 with no mention of gambling in its descriptors. Frickin' NBA 2K21 is rated PEGI 3, even though that game has very blatant imagery of games you'd actually find in casinos, like roulette and slot machines and pachinko and whatnot. The level of favoritism and special treatment being shown here is just so obvious and blatant. And look, you can see for yourself. Control F, if I type in gambling, nothing. On the NBA 2K21 listing, same with FIFA, gambling, nothing. But Pokemon, there's one segment in the game where there are a bunch of slot machines and you can do simulated gambling where you're betting in-game currency in this very harmless mini-game. That is deemed to be crossing a line that at one point got its age rating up to PEGI 12, and now if there's a re-release of Pokemon Red, it'll get a PEGI 18 rating because seemingly PEGI wants to present the narrative that fake gambling, where you spend in-game currency and the rewards you get aren't even that big of a deal in terms of how it affects your game and your progression, that stuff is somehow, where you don't get to spend any real money on it, deemed more dangerous than FIFA card packs. You've got FIFA, a game that people have reported to have caused psychological and financial harm, and then you got Pokemon, which kids love and have fun with, a game with no reports about how its casino area and the small and largely inconsequential gambling minigame has afflicted kids or adults, has financially or psychologically harmed anyone. There's objective proof out there that FIFA is far less safe than frickin' Pokemon Red, and yet these video game organizations continue to refuse to acknowledge reality. With the way PEGI gives loot boxes actual gambling special treatment, you're gonna see Mario games be rated for adults only. It's all just so backwards. And it's not even that I disagree that games featuring imagery of gambling or simulated gambling should be rated higher. What gets me is the double standards here of what a big deal simulated gambling is, whereas real gambling that's just being given another name, that's apparently nothing. That's apparently of no concern whatsoever. It's as good as saying that playing a VR first-person shooter game is less safe than waving around a loaded gun. If this doesn't prove how full of shit these lobbied organizations are, I don't know what will. But that's just one man's take, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on PEGI's recent revision when it comes to simulated gambling and how anything with simulated gambling will be deemed PEGI 18, with the exception of loot boxes, which are actual gambling. Share your thoughts below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.